Hey everybody, there's something really important that I want to talk to all of you guys about. Recently, it's been making the news rounds that morel mushrooms are causing a disease outbreak or an illness outbreak. Um, Now, we're going to get into this and we're going to discuss what the causes were, and rest assured that morels themselves are not containing some new unknown pathogen or disease or bacteria or anything of that sort. Um, the incidents that we're going to cover here, here in a minute or so, are rather isolated, and there's no reason for you guys to panic. Now, if we look at the news headlines, we're going to see something a little different. So let's get right into it. On April 18th, 2023, the Montana Department of Health and Human Services was notified of two people who experienced severe nausea, diarrhea, and vomiting after eating at a sushi restaurant in Bozeman, Montana. One person died in the hospital, and the other person died shortly after being discharged from the hospital. So the question most people have is, what happened? Are morels causing a disease outbreak? Well, if you were to look it up on Google, the headlines would certainly indicate that is the case. Now, of course, the purpose of headlines is to generate clicks, and since the morel mushroom is one of the most popular mushrooms in the world, with millions of people going out to forage them, and these news websites are pushing out these articles right around the rise of morel season, it's very obvious what's happening here. These headlines are intentionally misleading people to generate clicks. So let's dive into this issue and let's see what happened. Now, in Bozeman, Montana, this particular restaurant was not abiding by some of the general practices for preparing morel mushrooms. On April 8th, it was noted that the morels were served partially cooked, where the restaurant basically just took a boiling marinade and then poured it over the raw morel mushrooms and just let them sit for 75 minutes like that. That's not enough to cook them. However, on April 17th, what happened was the morels were raw and cold marinated, much like you would do with a chicken, a pork, or a steak, or something of that sort, and then they were just served after that. So the mushrooms were served raw and cold, which again, as we all should know, or most of you should know, that is the wrong thing to do with morel mushrooms. Now, after all of this was reported to the CDC and the Montana Public Health and Human Services, basically what they did was they went to this restaurant and they did an investigation. So after a little bit of investigation on this restaurant, they discovered that not only were they not cooking the morels properly, but there were also several other health code violations. Now keep in mind, this is a sushi restaurant. One of the last places you want health code violations is at a sushi restaurant, okay? So what were some of these other violations that were found? Well, things like improper temperature control, improper timing control, also improper food storage, and improper storage of personal items. So in April of 2023, this restaurant was the center of 51 people getting sick, and 2 people had actually lost their lives due to these unsafe practices and unsafe cooking practices when it comes to morels. Now, this restaurant was basically rolling out this new special sushi roll that contained morel mushrooms. And I'm assuming, since it was a sushi restaurant, the chef or owner or whoever made this idiotic decision basically decided sushi equals raw, morels in the sushi roll, they must be raw as well. And unfortunately, people got sick and 2 lost their lives because of it. So that leaves us with the question of what makes raw morels so dangerous to consume. Well, according to Mary and Maxwell of the Puget Sound Mycological Association, there are 2 possible causes. The first one is chitin contained within the morel mushroom. Now, chitin is in many things, like, for example, our fingernails. It's also in the exoskeleton of shellfish. Chitin can be rather hard to break down, but if we want to actually see how chitin can be broken down by, for example, cooking, like you're supposed to do with morel mushrooms, we can also just get our fingernails really soggy and soak them for a long time. And notice how they start to become soft and pliable. That is the chitin starting to break down in your fingernails. So whenever you're cooking morel mushrooms, the chitin does need to be cooked down. Another thing that she had mentioned is morel mushrooms may contain a type of naturally occurring hydrazine. So what is hydrazine? Well, hydrazine is, as we know it, is generally an inorganic compound that is contained in things like pesticides and even rocket fuel. Now, it's not clear if morels actually do contain a potential type of naturally occurring hydrazine. However, it is a decent theory considering hydrazine can have multiple devastating effects on the human body. Hydrazine can affect multiple body processes, from neurological to even the pulmonary and respiratory and digestive systems. So, hydrazine is also a potential for something like this to be causing these illnesses and deaths within these people from eating improperly cooked morel mushrooms. Now, in the article by Scientific American, Marion Maxwell also states that there are some people who may be extra sensitive to this naturally occurring hydrazine within the morel mushrooms, which is why some people still get some gastrointestinal distress after eating properly cooked morels. Now, there is another mushroom known as the false morel, which is known to contain a naturally occurring hydrazine compound, which is why they must be cooked in a very, very special manner. A lot of people in the Nordic countries or in the upper peninsulas of Michigan, for example, very, very frequently cook false morel mushrooms and have no issues doing so. Okay, so now we can see what happened here in this restaurant in Montana, but let's ask ourselves another question. How common is foodborne illness in relation to morel mushrooms? Well, in the United States, it actually seems to be really rare, thankfully. In 2019, a Michelin star restaurant in Spain was the center of an illness related to morels after approximately 30 people got sick. In British Columbia, raw morels were served on a pasta which sickened 77 people, although none of them had died. So what are the takeaways from all of this? Well, one is to properly cook your morels and to store them properly. And this should come as no surprise. Every single mushroom guide I've ever seen says to cook morel mushrooms. Okay, so if this restaurant in Montana was a sushi restaurant, I would assume that the deaths are most likely related to a combination of improper storage of the fish and sushi and improper cooking of the morels. And I think those two combined is what caused the deaths of those two unfortunate loss of lives. So in the end, basically, no, morels are not dangerous. And if you just do the bare minimum of even research on morels and do your due diligence, you're going to be totally fine. There is no new bacterial pathogen or virus or anything like that contained in morel mushrooms. You are totally safe to go out and forage morel mushrooms this time of year. I know the morel season is in really, really popping up in the South in the United States right now and in other parts of the world as well. So please go out, continue to go out and hunt and forage your morel mushrooms. Please enjoy cooking them. Just make sure you cook them properly. That's going to do it for this video. I thank all of you guys for watching, and be safe out there, guys.